Good day everyone, Commerce here with another AJS-37 video. Now, I lately have flown a few night or bad weather missions in the Viggen, and I figured I might as well make a short video about the Viggen in this environment and show off a few more of its systems that I have not covered yet. I know those kind of no visibility missions are not for everyone, since you can't see a whole lot, but I like to fly missions like that every now and then and occasionally show some of the plane's capabilities in such an environment in a video. So this is going to be such a mission at night and in bad weather. Cloud cover is about 120 to 150 meters above airfield elevation. Using the Terrain Avoidance radar mode, radar bombing mode, as well as TILS, that's Tactical Instrument Landing System, to get back on the ground afterwards. Now, the Viggen is of course a plane that entered service in the early 70s, and quite a capable one at that for this time frame, but still, even though our version got some upgrades, the plane does not have the same kind of capabilities in dark or zero visibility than more modern ones, like the Harrier we took a look at in the last video. The plane has illumination bombs, and usually one plane would fly in first to illuminate the target, giving the rest the needed visibility to bomb a visible target. But in this mission I specifically want to drop my bombs with no visibility from the clouds. In order to do so, the Viggen has a radar bombing mode, although a very simple one, which isn't very accurate. So don't expect any precision bombing. Well then, let's go over the short little mission we will fly today. We take off from the Tonopah Test Range, famous for being the F-117 Nighthawks as well as the Red Eagle's base back in the day. And our target is an even more famous airfield, the Groom Lake facility here. I will try to hit the western side of this airfield, the tarmac where the planes are parked, using the Viggen's radar bombing mode. But as I said, the radar bombing is very inaccurate and I did not have much practice with it, so I call hitting the airfield in general a win in this case. But before we can attempt to hit Area 51, accurate or not, we need to get there, preferably without hitting the ground, especially the hills on our route that are here, here or here. Now, the Viggen wasn't designed for proper low-level flying at night in bad weather. It does not have an automatic terrain avoidance system, just a radar mode that shows you the terrain so you can avoid flying into it, but that has to be done manually, and it does have its limitations, as we will see. So we will stay a bit higher compared on how I would fly the Viggen in daylight, but still lower than those hills are, so we needed the terrain avoidance radar to avoid them. Now, during the first half of the trip I will keep my altimeter setting at the Tonopah testing field's elevation, since the low ground on the way is mostly lower than the airfield, especially when we get closer to Groom Lake, which is at a lower elevation. The hills around it are of course not, and the terrain close and leading up to those hills can be higher than what my current altimeter settings consider zero, but that's why we have the terrain avoidance mode from the radar. Now, when we get ready to bomb Groom Lake, we set the altimeter for the target QFE. Well, now that we are in the air, let's go over the Viggen radar's terrain avoidance mode. So the radar is on, and I dialed the brightness of the screen back a bit, since otherwise it's a bit too bright at night. Another thing that helps when using the terrain avoidance mode is to switch the radar from the default logarithmic mode to the linear mode. That gives you a better contrast, but less detail. But details we don't need at the moment. We switch back to the logarithmic later when we attack, since we then need the higher details to recognize the target's runways and so on the radar screen. Now, the terrain avoidance mode is on, let's talk about how it works. It's quite simple. When the terrain avoidance mode is on, the radar antenna is locked to the horizon and only scans left to right at that elevation. Since it is locked to the horizon, it only sees things that are exactly at your altitude, even if you point the nose up or down a bit, since the beam is pointing at the horizon, not where your nose is pointing. That's important to keep in mind, since it means you can point your nose down a bit at the ground and the radar screen shows you nothing in front of you, cause it scans what's at your altitude. But that way, when you climb, you also know exactly once you're high enough to have cleared an obstacle in front of you. If the beam would be locked to the plane's attitude instead of the horizon, it would show nothing as soon as you point the nose up, even if there are still things in the way at your altitude. So, the black radar returns we got on the screen right now indicate terrain that is at our altitude or higher. Looks like pretty close at the moment, but with the radar range set to either 15 kilometers or sometimes 30 kilometers, we still have a few kilometers of clear space, so more than enough time to climb. Also, interpreting the radar in this mode can be a bit counterintuitive also. For example, keep in mind that if when you have a steep mountain or a steep wall of a valley in front of you, this obstacle will block the radar beam completely. Of course, so you can't get any radar returns from behind that obstacle, only from where the beam is hitting the steep mountainside. Because of this, the radar will show such a steep large mountain just as a thin black line on the screen. It can't show you anything behind the mountain, so everything past that thin black line would be white. You can see that nicely when you fly through a deep valley with the Terrain Avoidance mode on. It will show the valley walls as just thin lines and nothing else on the screen. On the other hand, if you have very white black walls or areas on the radar screen, like we have and had on the radar so far, it actually indicates terrain that is relatively flat and just about at your altitude or even a bit lower. Because the only way for the radar beam that is locked to the horizon to show you such a wide radar return is if it can skim above the flat surface of it. And that is what can make using this terrain avoidance mode a bit counterintuitive, since that means if you see larger and wider returns on the screen of an obstacle, the flatter it actually is, and you can usually avoid it by just climbing a little bit, or it is even a little bit below you and the radar beam is just skimming the top of it. If you see a wide half circle as a return, for example, that usually indicates that the terrain is actually flat and a bit lower, and the beam at a certain range, as it gets wider, skims above the surface, so you can get returns from a wider area. We had that at the beginning of the mission, and right now we also have a nice example of where we got a little bit low over the terrain, but it was flat desert ground, so almost the whole screen got dark. Just climb a little bit and then it will be almost gone. And when you take a look at the map, we can also see that here, closing in on waypoint 2, the terrain is pretty flat. The hills are behind us. Only to our left, on the left side of the radar screen, we had an area that seemed to be a bit steeper, as here the radar beam can't get past an obstacle, which may show the small hill to our north, or the terrain has a lower elevation behind that line, also possible. In any case, if you see a wide radar return, it's usually flat terrain. If you just see a very thin black line in front of you, that is more worrisome, since that means a steeper and higher obstacle that is blocking your radar beam and your flight path, and you don't know for sure how much you will have to climb to get above it until you are high enough. So, as I said, that is a bit counterintuitive. Your normal reaction would be that a large black blob on the screen would be a large mountain, and a thin line something smaller, but it's usually the other way around. Well, that's the terrain avoidance mode. We are closing in on waypoint 2 and our target is on waypoint 3. So let's go there and take a look at using the radar to attack the airfield. I dial in the QFE for the target as usual on the Viggen to get the target elevation as 0 on the altimeter. The idea is to bomb from the clouds without visibility to see what we can do with just using the radar to aim. Now, as we get closer to 15 kilometers to the airfield, I turn the terrain avoidance mode off and go back to the normal operating mode. I also switch back to the logarithmic mode, which gives better details, and in order to see those details better, I crank the radar screen's contrast up quite a bit. Playing with the contrast can help a lot to see the returns better. Now, the weapon selector is set to radar bombing mode already, I did that at startup, so all I have to do is go to ANF on the master mode selector and get a small Corsair on the radar screen I can use to aim. By now you can see the outlines of the airfield's runway and taxiways on the radar screen. Now, the crosshair is pointing about 3 kilometers in front of my plane, and since we are pretty high, I reduced my speed a bit. If you're too high and too fast, those 3 kilometers won't be enough for the little 3 kilometer aiming device. The attack itself is pretty much a CCRP attack. When the crosshair is pointing somewhat at the right thing, you hold the pickle button down and the plane will release the bombs automatically. As I said, I wanted to hit the west side of the airfield about where the planes are parked and try to adjust my aim there and press the pickle button. And missed the target. I overshot and then the target by quite a bit. Well, as I said, the bombing mode is not very accurate. It's hard to aim properly on the radar screen, and I was a bit too much to the east and pressed the pickle button a bit too late. But I did hit the airfield at least. Again, it is not a precision bombing mode, but it is enough to aim for, say, an airfield or a harbor in zero visibility, some target that is easily to see on the radar. Well, with the main task of the mission accomplished, it is time to get back on the ground. Landing at night and bad weather can be difficult in many planes. Luckily, the Viggen has access to quite a powerful system to help it do that, which makes it somewhat easy. Especially considering the age of the plane and that system, the TILS or Tactical Instrument Landing System of the Swedish Air Force, which was introduced with the Viggen. The basics are similar to other instrument landing systems. The TILS can give you pretty precise steering information directly on the HUD, which was in using at the time, and get you pretty much directly to the runway by following the instructions of the flight director directly in the HUD or the ADI if the HUD is not available for some reason. In this case, we had the landing waypoint already loaded in the data cartridge, so when I turn the master mode into instrument landing mode with the TILS selector in automatic, it will automatically set the correct TILS channel for our landing airbase. If we programmed the coordinates for the airbase manually instead, we would have to look up the correct TILS channel in the kneeboard and set the TILS for that channel range. I also use the plane's auto-throttle system, so I don't have to worry about the throttle. Stay at between 500 to 400 meters above airfield elevation. Make sure you have the QFE set properly or the QNH so you get the proper altitude. And when I was about 10 kilometers out, I extend the gear and keep following the directions down. At about 10 kilometers the system will usually order you to descend. And in our case we break out of the clouds at about 150 to 120 meters above the airfield elevation and can continue with the landing visually. So now it's just a matter of placing the flight path vector indicator on the runway and continue to descend till we are on the ground. And that's that for our little night mission in the Viggen. I thought that especially the ground avoidance mode for the radar can be a bit counterintuitive and thought a video like that might help someone. Anyway, the next video will be in daylight again. Till then, this is it for this video, thanks for watching and maybe I see you next time.